Welcome to the Self Love Uncensored Podcast. We are your hosts. I am Vanessa McWilliams.
And I'm Amanda Wozni.
And we are self-proclaimed experts in all things self-love.
Here you'll find uncensored discussions about life, living unapologetically, and becoming our best selves. Welcome to today's episode.
So good. I'm excited for today.
Yes.
I'm really excited to talk about this because I think, I read this
We're on
book.
episode 10, Vanessa.
What's that?
We're on episode 10, double digits.
Right? Isn't that crazy?
We should celebrate that.
We
That's
should.
cool.
This is, I feel like we've just, I feel like we've been doing this forever, but at the same time, I feel like we just started. It's weird.
Yeah, I know.
We're just getting into it. It's so exciting.
Yeah. So much more to come.
I'm so excited to talk about this today because I read this book a couple of years ago, and it was one of the things that it's one of the main things that I go back to all the time, like just mentally. So today we're talking about The 4 Agreements, the book by, oh my goodness, now I can't think of his name.
Don Miguel
Ruiz. That's how you said, Don Miguel Ruiz.
Yeah.
So good. This book is so it's like a gut punch almost. Like it's this tiny little book that you can read in a day, but it is like the foundation and the cornerstone of if you want to transform your life and start like in an hour. It's so good. So good.
And it's such a good audiobook too. And it's really quick. Like you can listen to it in, I think it's like 2.5 hours. We talked about it before.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so good. So if you haven't read The 4 Agreements, or if you don't have any idea what we're talking about, The 4 Agreements is basically 4 agreements for how to live your life, to be, from things of letting go of things that bother you, letting go of anger, letting go of judgment, letting go of fear, and really just giving you like the staples of how to live a happier, more abundant life. Is really all I can think of how to say it. It's hard to explain it when to give people an idea of like how powerful it is really hard. But let's just get right into it. Do you have anything that do you want to say before we start?
Let's talk about what they are so everybody knows what we're talking about. Do you want me to read them?
Absolutely. Let's start with number 1.
Okay. So the first of the 4 agreements is to be impeccable with your word. And I think the most concise way to sum that up is to live with integrity.
Yes.
So do what you say you're going to do with yourself, with others, with everything, basically. So
and say only what you mean is the biggest thing, right? There's a couple of little bullet points here from an article that we found on the interwebs, which is like fantastic because it made our job a lot easier. But A is, like you said, speak with integrity. B, say only what you mean, which is a really hard thing to do. It's easy to think of it, but then, like, I know myself, I get stuck. I used to get stuck, I should say. I'm a people pleaser, just by the way that I've been raised. And so this was a really hard one for me because quite a few times I'd catch myself saying yes to things that I didn't want to do. Like when you make a decision, you say yes to someone and then all of a sudden you have that pit in your stomach and you're like, ugh, I don't really want to do that actually. It's really hard to really say yes to only the things that you want and say no to some things. Saying no can be really hard.
It can.
Number 3, or C, I should say, under this is avoid using the word to speak against yourself or to gossip about others. So
which this we talk about a lot.
Yes, this is all like the way that you talk about yourself internally and the way that you describe yourself to friends, or if you make fun of yourself. I was really guilty of doing that, years ago. Is I try and make a joke before you could make a joke about me, I don't know if that's something that, like, maybe I'm abnormal in that. Like, are you somebody who cracks a joke about yourself first?
Yeah. I mean, or even if it's not a joke, just like letting people know the things that you suck at or are shitty at before they can find them out, kind of thing. Like, I find myself doing that at the gym all the time. I'll be like, oh yeah, I love this workout, but I'm terrible at these. So whatever. And it's like, right. And that just, what I'm doing, even though I'm speaking it out to somebody else, subconsciously, all I'm doing is reaffirming that belief that I'm not good at it. And is that going to help me get better at it? No.
You're feeding the monster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So whether you make fun of yourself or whether you just preempt something with letting somebody know about a failure or a downfall or something to your personality or your accomplishments, I think we're all, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I know that probably most everybody I've come across in life that I've known well enough does that at some point in time.
Absolutely. And I think we're conditioned just to do it. Like it's weird that we can think that we can talk down about ourselves because then it makes it okay. Like it's such a weird, when in actuality it's not, because like you said, we're feeding that monster, right? That little itty bitty shitty committee.
We wouldn't do it to somebody else. Like I wouldn't walk up to you and be like, oh, ball jokes. And then you'd be like, pardon me, but it's okay for you to say it about yourself. Why?
I know, right?
Like I know. Yeah.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But that's the thing is like, once you know you're doing it and then to be intentional about it. And when you find yourself doing it in the future, not to like beat yourself up over doing it, but then just becoming more aware of that that's a habit that you have and just stopping it. Right.
Well, and the first step to that totally is, you're right, awareness, right? Just knowing that you're doing it. You don't always have to try and stop it. And then eventually after awareness becomes when you start doing an action in the other direction. So if you think to yourself, you're going to crack a joke about the fact that you're bald before somebody else can say it because you're worried about it, then you're going to, even if it's just inside your head, be like, no, I'm beautiful and perfect the way I am. I don't need to comment on it. Like it's there and it's me and that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. Absolutely. Now, D is one that I live by 110%. So anybody who ever says, I've had people in the past say that I'm too positive or I'm too happy, too blah, blah, blah. This is why, because letter D, use the, I can't talk today. Holy man.
It's tricky. It's we're on 1D if you're trying to keep along there. Yeah.
We're trying to keep it easy for everyone and I'm screwing myself up. 1D, I feel like a teacher now. Use the power of your word in the direction of truth and love. So this for me is all kindness. That is why I try really hard to live in a state of kindness, because when you're kind to other people, it typically comes back to building a foundation where you start to become kind to yourself as well. And this is all about your word. Like we've been talking about it this whole time. Like I can't go out into the world and be really kind to other people and then come home and trash myself. Yeah. I know a lot of people do that because that's just what we're trained to do. That's just our subconscious conditioning, right? But using the power of word in the direction of truth and love, when you start getting in the routine of doing that and showing up as that person for other people, it's going to just start defaulting as being the place that you operate from no matter what. Right. Yeah. And that's part of how I've grown my self-love is I started by spreading love and truth out into the world. And that became the foundation of my healing because it showed me the way to my own truth and love for myself. So
yeah. And I think the other side of that too is that, like when you genuinely are that way to others and hopefully internally have that self-compassion and that self-love, like people can pick up on the energy of that. Like we talked about that in the last episode with the universe and everything. And like, if you're falsely positive and falsely kind, and like it comes from a place of malice and not being genuine and in alignment, those are the time, like people will pick up on that, whether you're really in tune with energy or really understand energy or really pay attention to it, you can pick up on people that are fake.
Yes.
And so 100%. It's super important to make sure that you're authentic. So if you really don't love yourself, show up and love on other people. And then that will raise your vibration and your energy, and it will help you to learn that self-compassion. So.
100%. 100%. Moving on to number 2. Do you have anything that you want to add to number 1?
No, I don't think so.
I think we probably covered it. Hey,
I think it's pretty concise with integrity. Say what you mean.
What you say. Yeah.
Yes.
To other people, but not only other people, but yourself is the most important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Moving on to 2A. Don't take anything personally. This is another thing. Like I am telling you, I'm going to say this on all 4 points. This is something else that I think is so freeing, is that you cannot take anything personally. So nothing others do is because of you.
Yeah.
And this is such I don't even know how to explain it. This was an aha moment for me when I read through this chapter. when it goes into like great detail that people project themselves from their own situations and their own upbringing and all of the things that they've been conditioned throughout their entire life. Right. And the only way that I've been able to let go of my fear of people, and I should preface this because I still have this fear and I'm actively working through it right now. I'm at like this breakthrough point that I've been talking to Amanda about behind the scenes. That I am still afraid of people's judgments about me because I can't control somebody coming up to me and saying something either from a standpoint of like thinking that I'm sick, but then I've also had people that have come up and said some really hurtful, stupid things to me about the way that I look. And I can't control what other people do. And that's the part that scares me. But I also know in my heart that those people are hurting. If someone has the guts to say something really mean to me about the way that I look, that person is obviously in some massive pain because they're projecting onto me. And that has nothing to do with me. Right. So nothing others do is because of you.
Yeah.
Is
it's
such
like that
a
meme,
freeing
right?
statement.
That one that went around for a while that said, other people's opinion of you is none of your business.
Yes.
You have no control over it. And it's literally like wasted energy to even spend any time acknowledging it or being sad about it or being mad about it. Don't give them your power. Like you're giving your power away when you focus on that. Worry about yourself. That's all you can control.
100%. Absolutely. To be what others say and do is a projection of their own reality and their own dream. So like we just covered that. Right. And this comes down, I think, a lot to when you're going after a goal for yourself or you've got something that you're, striving towards in your life. There's a lot of things that I think both of us work towards that we don't openly talk about because for me, I can't speak for you, but for me, like I have some big goals and some big dreams that I don't think more than 2 or 3 people know, only because of the fact that I guard that with my life. I don't want somebody to say anything to me about, that my dream is too big or my dream is too scary or I can't do the thing. Right. Like I guard my dreams close to my chest or close to my heart because I don't want to have that negativity from someone else's projection onto me. Right.
Yeah. And sometimes it's really hard to control that too. Like I have a really huge goal that I'm working on that I've been very selective on who I've told about it. And one person that I thought would be a very trusted person who's in the like space of the goal that I'm going for. And I told them about it and they basically like gave me the stink eye and were like, really? Like, and it was a really like, do you really think you're capable of doing that? And it's really freaking hard when you get vulnerable and share it, especially with somebody that you thought would be in your corner. And then they're not. Right. So it was I guess looking back, it was probably a really good lesson on how to be able to separate that. And I don't want to say that it has made me apprehensive in sharing my goals with people because I think it is important not just to have it on a piece of paper or in your heart. It is important for it to get out into the world somewhere.
Yes.
Right. And just having that energy of knowing that it's out there like that just helps things conspire for you. I truly believe that if you hold it too guarded, then the universe doesn't know what's going on. Right.
Totally.
So
I like to leak, I guess you could call it leak my smaller goals. But my big, big, big goal, well, I shouldn't say that I've never told my big, big, big goal. I think I've talked about my big goal, like my gigantic one, at events and stuff. But I don't think I've ever publicly came out on like social media and been like, this is what I'm working towards. Like I do that with my smaller goals as I'm actively achieving them. But those are all the things that are going to get me to my big goal. Right. So, but as far as like my big, big goal, I only share that in very sacred spaces.
Yeah. And people tend to be supportive of those smaller goals because a lot of people just don't dream big enough. Like when we talk big goals, like we're pushed to set big goals, like scary goals, like pee your pants, like you are worried about saying them because people are going to look at you like, what the fuck? Like, are you serious?
Think you are?
That's what you're, like most people's goal is like something small, something, what's the old acronym, SMART goals or whatever. That's not how we set goals.
No,
we'll talk about that in another episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're meant to be big. Like you're meant to dream big. You're meant to grow big and create big and not fucking be scared of trying to be big and take up space. And we're conditioned as part of growing up to set things as being realistic, right? Like
when it's the people, it's the dreamers and the doers that go out and make big things happen. And then we all sit behind and think, well, how did they do that? And then a lot of times I hear like, oh, they must have been born into a family that has maybe money or privilege or whatever. But in reality, most of these people don't. There's a lot of people that are born that way, and that's okay. That's great. They've got, you know, the things that they've got extra things that they can do to get their goals achieved. But when it comes down to it, I think it means more, just for myself, it means more that I work and I hustle to get to where I want to go, versus I think if I had the kind of step up, I guess, without sounding super bitchy, but you know what I mean? Like,
but it's true. Most of the really high achieving people in the world, if you were to interview, and I'm sure somebody has, I cannot remember where I heard this, so I can't cite reference, but I know I listened to a podcast where some of like the world's top like entrepreneurs and stuff like that were interviewed, and most of them come from like next to nothing. They don't come from money. They weren't born into a family and given millions of dollars and then they went and did something with it. Like when you have everything handed to you and things come easily, it's really easy to get complacent.
100%.
And when you have nothing and you have a big dream, you're gonna fucking bust your ass and make it happen, if nothing else, to prove freaking people wrong who said that you couldn't do it.
That's a little bit of my motivation. 110% from the people who told me, you know, growing up and all the things. Yeah, that's part of my motivation is just sit back and watch me. Right. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know how I've done anything in the last 10
now
years,
I'm going to damn well figure it out.
Yes. But that's it. I'm going to show up imperfectly and I'm going to do something and see what works. Right. So to cap this off, when you're immune to the options and actions of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering, which is like right where I'm sitting right now. Just so crazy. I'm on the cusp of like a personal breakthrough. And this is exactly where I am right now, is I've just got to the point where I've had enough, and I'm not worrying about the, you know, other people's opinions and stuff. They're still going to hurt if I get, I'm not going to not get comments and stuff or get stared at. Like, it's my life. That's what happens when you look different in the world. But yeah, the fact that like, I'm ready to let go of just needing to control what's going to happen. Cause I still get comments from people, even when I wear my hat, right? Yeah. It happened when I wore my wig. So yeah, it's hard to be the victim of needless suffering. It's a very hard space to live in. So
yeah. And it's an amazing space to live in once you can get past it. And that doesn't mean, as always, that you're going to be like that every day. There's still days where you're going to fall back into that, that feeling. But yeah, it's to be able to not worry about what other people say about you and not let it eat away at your energy is definitely, it's a very valuable tool to have in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. It's when you get to set yourself free. I think that's the biggest thing, right?
Oh yeah.
Yep. Number 3, don't make assumptions. So good.
Yeah.
So good. And I think that a lot
of people
do they say
about assume? It just makes an ass out of you and me, right?
Yes.
And it's totally true.
Yeah. And most of the time when we assume something, especially when it's like a negative thing or whatever, 9 times out of 10, we're wrong. We make some shit up in our head, and then we go through this needless suffering, and it's like, why? Right? Like, why do we do this to ourselves?
Yes. And I think that's important to touch on, maybe get a little bit more into the book. Like the beginning of the book talks about how you're conditioned as a child and how you're like indoctrinated to believe the things that you believe. Because as a child, whatever somebody tells you is just what you're going to believe. So if your parents tell you you're good for doing X behavior, that's what you're going to believe. If they tell you you're bad for doing Y behavior, that's what you're going to believe. And your actions and everything in life, and even the things that you think about yourself, are shaped from those kind of environments. So it's like everything that even the projections, like we talked about, like the negative people that projection onto you, it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with the hurting inside of them. And a lot of times that hurt and that lack of self-worth and all the negative things they think about themselves were conditioned as children from their parents. And we're not saying that parents are bad for what they've done. Our parents did it to us, their parents did it to them, and now we're doing it to our kids. Like, it doesn't matter how much you try to improve and change, you're still going to fall short in some areas. That's just inevitable. We're human. We're not perfect. But that is a huge foundation. Like, that statue, I can't think of the artist that makes it, but there's a statue outside somewhere that shows the grown person with the child standing inside.
Yes.
And that is like the most amazing visual representation of who we are in the world. We are literally adults walking around with a hurt child inside that is determining our behaviors and our words and our thoughts and our actions.
Absolutely.
And everything.
Absolutely. 100%. Well, and I think one of the biggest things too to remember is that when we think back to like the things that have been conditioned into us, one of the things, I can only speak for myself, that I was able to kind of learn on my journey and really let kind of go of, is the fact that my parents did the best that they could to raise me with what they had. Right. And once I was finally able to like understand, all the pain and all the hurt had gone. I switched.
Forgive them.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I was able to switch my thinking from like, well, you guys fucked me up, but that wasn't even what it was. But you know what I mean? Like, you guys didn't do enough or whatever. You guys didn't protect me or whatever it was. But then once I was able to like understand that they did the best they could with what they had, and I was able to give them compassion and forgive them, was the day that really I felt a massive shift in my journey. Massive shift.
And I feel
because
like
they don't know any better either.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And I feel like becoming a parent really helps a person with that, when you start to realize, as you start to make mistakes with your own kids, and you'll totally realize when you're making mistakes and stuff. And sometimes it's really hard to correct them, but then you'll start to realize just how fucking hard it is to raise humans in any environment. And then you totally start to have compassion for the way that you were raised. And I mean, that goes as far as even people that have been raised in abusive environments. Like, odds are, if you were raised in an abusive home, they were raised in an abusive home. And like, those cycles are fucking hard to break. Like, you hated it when you were a kid. It is. But for them, like, that's how they learn to be loved. It's like, it's crazy to think of it that way, but it's
that's a whole other.
It is. It is. And it really makes that compassion come out when you can realize just how much of who we are is just a hurt little kid running around in the world and responding to adult situations as a child. Like, you just, it sounds ridiculous, but it's totally true. It shapes everything in your life. And you had no control over it.
No. And that's one thing that I've done when, you know, things get really, really hard, or I'm up against something that's really, really feeling like defeating and stuff, is I think of the other person in the situation also as a kid. Right. Because then it's like, you can have compassion towards that person. That is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, is give compassion to people who were fucking horrible to me. But that's where I took back my power. And that's where I was really able to start finding my own path and my own journey, was letting go of that.
And that really highlights number 3, to not make assumptions, because you literally don't know what you're dealing with. You have no idea the kind of shitstorm that human might have went through and why they're shitting on you now. Right. Like, it's not fair. Bullies are like that, right? Like, bullies are often, even though they seem to be on the surface the most strong and powerful and dominant kind of people, they're actually the most hurt people, and they're projecting it in the only way that they know how. And that's to hurt other people. That's to bring somebody down to their level and feel as shitty as they do. And then they're satisfied. If I can make the world around me feel the same way I feel inside, then I can live in this world.
It's validating for them. It gives them power, right? It gives them the sense of power. It doesn't actually give them power. 110%. Absolutely agree with that. What number are we on?
What letter are we on? I think we're on 3B.
Oh, there we go. Communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings, sadness, and drama. Oh, I feel like we're going to preach from the choir here, because this is something that I think everybody does, whether it's like through a text message. And I have to preface this with, damn technology, because technology makes this go even more rampant than I think it did before.
There's no context.
No, because when when we were younger, you'd have to pick up the phone and you'd have to call your friend. And even at that time, if she answered and she was like, hey, You'd be like, hey, what's wrong? Boom, you just made an assumption. Nothing's wrong, right? But I just don't feel like talking really. I don't have a lot of energy, whatever, it doesn't matter. But it was easier back then to really correct it right away. Whereas now we've got freaking text messaging, we have emailing, we have all of the different things where even myself, I struggle with if I send a text message or an email asking a question or just confirming something, I'm the person who really appreciates having an okay or a got it, something back to show that the text message or the email was received and that exactly right. Because I've had it happen in the past where I've assumed that what I have sent is sufficient to whether it's a job opportunity or a speaking opportunity or whatever. And I assume everything is good. And then a couple days before said thing is happening, I email and I'm like, I haven't had any details. And they're like, oh, we never got your response. I'm like, oh, so it goes in both ways. Like, I think it's really important to never make assumptions and always just ask the hard questions, whether it's in relationships, whether it's in finance, whether it's in business, whether it's in a friendship with your kids, with your spouse, with your friends, like, and if you do have something you have to talk about that's a hard conversation, have the hard conversation before it becomes
it would be better to be
thing.
Yeah. And better to be in person than by it. I think that's the problem too, is it lacks context. It lacks emotion. I mean, you can use emojis, but when you're upset or indifferent or anything like that about something, you're less inclined to use anything like that. So it can be misconstrued for sure. And you also have to recognize that the misunderstanding can come from your side in the state that you're in when you read it. So if you sent me something that was just very concise and blunt and to the point and didn't have like LOLs and all the kind of stuff that you normally do, like say you're super busy and somebody's like, oh, I need this done. You're like, yeah, I already did it. And then if you're already in like a stressed out or sad or emotional, you're going to be like, oh, well, like, why are they mad at me? Like, because I better not ask them about stuff anymore, because obviously they're pissed off that I even said anything because they didn't respond the way they normally do. So you really have to keep that in check, that your own emotional state, and that can happen in person too, but I think it happens less in person because you can read emotion and stuff like that on somebody's face. But in text message and emails, like, I know that I've done that before too. And you just get like a really short, and it can seem snippy, and it's not meant to be snippy, or sometimes maybe it is meant to be passive aggressive. That happens too. But just recognize that, with social media, so like people that respond to your posts online, text messaging, emails, instant messaging, anything where you're not seeing somebody's face or hearing their voice in a conversation, you could totally be misconstruing what's being said.
Have you ever accidentally sent a text message in all capital letters?
So somebody was doing that to me yesterday, and they were like, I'm sorry for yelling at you.
Well, that's just it. Right away, you assume that they're yelling at you. Like, a simple conversation, meeting a friend could be like a text message in all caps that says, where are you? And they're like, what the hell? Why are you yelling at me? I'm not yelling at you. I was trying to park my car and I quickly text messaged you. Like, and that's the thing. Both ways, right? You can't assume either way. It's always best to just have the conversation, pick up the phone and be like, dude, are we good? What's happening? And ask the hard questions. If there's something that you have to ask the question. Don't assume. I've been really struggling with this over the past couple of years, is really, if I'm not sure of what someone has asked of me, I don't assume that I think I know. If I'm actually genuinely not sure, I ask the question, even if I feel like an idiot asking it, because I'd rather be totally clear than have something screw up and, have them assume I'm an idiot, whereas I know that I'm not. But that's the thing. You can't make assumptions, right? Like, it just, if you let that go, it frees up so much of your life. So much of your life. And it says with just this one agreement, you can completely transform your life. Which I truly believe. Truly.
I think we missed the first part, Vanessa. I think we missed 3A. Find the courage to ask questions and to express what you really want. That's my fault. I think I told you we were on B and we weren't. Yeah. So I think that one's, given that we didn't talk about it, that one in and of itself will change your life if you learn how to communicate with people
effectively.
Yes. And clearly, like you don't have to like convolute things. Like if you're a parent, I think we talked about this a while ago, in my introductory episode, that like one of the things that I needed to do when I started going to the gym was to very clearly articulate to my husband, like, I need help with the kids because you need to watch them so I can go.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like he comes home and he's not really watching them. So I'm going to be like,
yeah,
like it would sure be nice if I could have gone to the gym tonight an hour later, right? Like, what does that do? You're mad, he's mad. The kids are like, my parents hate each other. What's going on? Right? Whereas you could have just been up front and been like, cool, I'm so happy that you're home. I'm going to give you a kiss. I made supper. Kids are happy and they're playing. I'm going to go. I will be back at this time. And like, if you need anything, just call me or whatever. Right? Like, just be super clear and don't. You would be amazed at how people will step up for you when you just ask for what you want.
Yeah. Well, and another part of this that I was guilty of doing for many, many years until I was kind of brought aware to it is that emotional stacking. So a lot of times when we have those passive aggressive behaviors where, like you said, you'd come home or your husband would come home and you'd be ready to go to the gym and he's just sitting there not, doing anything. And you're like, oh, again, you just emotionally stack. He did this to me last week on Tuesday when I was supposed to show up for my thing. He did this the week before, and you like start emotionally stacking the things that they fuck up on. But it's like, our partners aren't mind readers. No, my best friend is not a mind reader. My parents, you are not a mind reader. I couldn't have sat here today and been like, hey, and our conversation this morning was a perfect example. We were talking about recording today for some bonus content. And I wasn't 100% sure this morning what time we were going to do it. We had set a rough kind of time, but I had to go get groceries. So we texted back and forth a couple times. You want to do it at 12? You want to do it at 12:30? Like,
rather than just assume like, I remember we said 12, you remember 12:30. And then I show up at 12 and I'm like, what the fuck, Vanessa's not here. Like, this is a waste of my time. Right.
And then I show up at 12:30 and you're pissed off
or gone.
Yeah, exactly. But that's just it. Like you have to have that emotional strength to be able to really ask for what you want. And honestly, like asking for help, I think, especially as women, is really hard because we're expected to just do it all, especially if we have a house and children and a husband and whatever. We're just expected, but who expects that? Right? Like it's just society's, right? It's just that conditioning from society that we grow up watching, the mom making the pie and having the hot dinner on the table and her children are happy and her husband comes home from a hard day of work. Well, we're not homemakers, most of us anymore. Like we all have our own work and our own jobs and stuff. And so we do have to ask for help. We can't do it all. But that's the thing. We can't assume that our partners and our friends and our family know what we need. We have to we have to ask, which will also leak over into them getting more comfortable with how you're showing up in the situations, and then them rising up to meet you and also asking for help if they're ready to as well. So I think it's so
I was just going to say something like that too. Like as you start to ask and set those expectations and make it really clear, you'll be surprised at, like, a spouse is a perfect example, that they will just start to create habits and do those things proactively without having to have that constant communication about it. And then you'll grow into new things. And that goes both ways, right? Like, or even with your family, like if your family's saying your mom's never babysat your kids, but you've never asked, right? And then you start asking on a regular basis, pretty soon she's going to text you on Friday and be like, so are the kids coming over tomorrow?
Yeah.
And you're going to be like, oh yeah, cool. Like that'd be great. Cause then I can get XYZ done.
Yeah.
So people will totally respond generally really well for the most part to what you ask for. And then it'll just get easier.
Yeah, absolutely. 110%. Oh, don't make assumptions. It's just so easy in a nutshell. That's but then it is complex. But we talk a lot about these 4 things through, I think, a lot of our episodes. They are really foundational things to learn. And like I said, we live by these things. And so you'll hear more about all of these things that we're talking about in basically all of our podcasts. I think we talk in every episode a little bit about each of these, right?
Yeah. Something that's in there. Yeah.
4A. We're going to get this right now.
Just 4. Just 4 for now.
Okay. We'll just do 4. Always do your best. Your best is going to change from moment to moment, and it will be different when you're healthy as opposed to sick. And I think it's really important too, to say that healthy as in not just like physically healthy, as in, like not feeling sick or not having a cold or not having a flu or whatever's going around, but also mentally healthy, I think is so important to highlight here, because we can be not sick as far as like having a cold or a flu, but then if you're having a day where your just mental health is not okay and you're really struggling, it is okay to just say, nope, not today. This is the best I can do. And not stress about it, I think is so, so important to give yourself grace. But like it says, from moment to moment, day to day, you had mentioned just before we hit record on here that even with your workouts and stuff, every day is different. You could hit personal best one day, and then the next day you're a struggle to hit 20 pounds lighter or whatever, however your routine is, right? Like, and that's just it. It really is your day to day. Take it day by day, second by second, if you have to.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Your best is totally going to be relative to so many different things. And I mean, beyond like health and sickness, I think that's probably just an example of one thing. Like, obviously you're going to perform better during a day when you're healthy as opposed when you're not feeling well. But yeah, like being able to give yourself grace, but still have an effort. Like, don't just completely write a day off. If you have things that you need to do, you just show up and do them to the best of your ability at that given time.
Well, and this is part of the reason why we have routines. Yeah. Right. Like, this is part of the reason why, when we talked in one of the prior episodes about routines, like to drink your water, to make sure you're eating nutritious foods more than you're eating maybe non-nutritious foods, to always have that kind of routine for yourself, so that you do, it just motivates you to do your best every day. And then when you do fall short, maybe on something, and even though that might not be considered falling short, it's the best that you could do with what you had in the moment. At least that way you're still starting your day off strong. You have those foundational things that keep pushing you forward, right? To try and do the harder things.
Yeah. And because they become so habitual too, like you probably won't even ever question doing those things really, or forget to do those things or skip out on doing those things. Like, it's kind of like getting out of bed and getting dressed. Like, it's just one of those things you just do, right? And it doesn't take a lot of willpower. So
yeah, totally. 4B. Under any circumstance, simply do your best and you will avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one.
And I think that really ties back to number one too, with the integrity, right? Like, if you said you were going to do something, like for me with my workouts, I'm saying I'm going to go on this many days a week or whatever. And on Thursday I have a workout and I feel like fucking garbage. Yeah. Well, I said I was going to go, so I'm going to go in, and if I got to lower the weights or whatever the case is, like, I'm going to put in the work. And the thing that you'll start to do is you'll start to recognize the reward feeling after, like that dopamine hit where you're like, you feel good. It makes you feel better. Yeah. And you'll just do the things because you know that that's going to come. Like, you know, you're going to feel better from eating the better choices in food. You know, you're going to feel better from going for a walk. You know, you're going to feel better from connecting with a friend and getting some social time, like whatever the thing is. It's really important to, if you're going to say you're going to do something, to do it, have the integrity, and show up as your best for that day. I think they really tie together.
And I think once you start living as, doing those regularly, you really start to figure out when you actually do need to take a rest day versus if you're just tired and you're letting yourself off the hook. I think is really important, because I think even myself, there's many, many times where I don't want to get up in the morning and go work out, but I've really become aware of when I actually do need the rest day and when it's just me not feeling like doing it.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think when you are impeccable with your word and you always try to do your best, that hand in hand will really start to help you decipher what's actually truly important to you. And when you don't want to do the thing, if you're just calling bullshit on yourself. Yeah. I think is the best way to say it for myself.
Yep.
Right. We have to, there's 99% of the things that are really great for us we don't want to do, because they're usually not fun. They're usually not sparkly. They're usually not, all of the things that give us joy or whatever, until we start doing them regularly. And then they do become the things that bring us joy. But that's the thing. We cannot bullshit ourselves out of wanting to do them.
Yeah.
Right.
And those are the things, would tie it back to our last episode. Those are the things that get you in the flow state too.
Yes.
Right. Like being impeccable and always showing up and doing your best. And showing up from a state of love, doing the hard things that you don't want to do, but are really good for you.
Yep. Absolutely. 100%. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add, Amanda, before we go?
No, I just would really suggest people go check out either the book or the audiobook. Again, like it's a super, super quick audiobook. I've listened to it probably half a dozen times, maybe more. And you'll get something different out of it every time, I swear. But it's really good. It's on Audible. That's my favorite place to listen to audiobooks. The person that reads it does a great job too. They're not boring to listen to. But I would suggest our listeners do that. And if you do, and you've never heard of the 4 agreements, and you go check it out and listen, we would love to hear from you.
Yes.
And hear how this episode and the book maybe helped you.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have any comments or questions about the podcast today, please feel free to leave them underneath our episode. Like every other episode, you can either listen to us on iTunes or Spotify. And if you want to see our beautiful faces in action, you can catch us on our YouTube channel. Otherwise, we would love to have you give us a review, leave us a star or 5 stars. Let's make 5 stars. 5 stars are good.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we will see you guys on the next episode. Thank you so much, Amanda. This was so good.
Have a good day, everybody.
Yes. Until next week. Yay. Have a wonderful one, guys. Bye.